Hello everyone, welcome back to another GMME video. Today is hopefully going to be an easy one for you. It's going to be rounding, estimating and bounds. So if we get to the content, it's exactly the same. For rounding, we're going to be going through decimal places and significant figures. Estimating basically just means for non-calculator papers, if you can't do a question, you might be able to make it more simple and work it out quicker. And then boundary is just min and max. So starting off with rounding, what actually is rounding? Rounding is just a way to make a number smaller. So if this number went on for 20 decimal places, it would be basically useless for GCSE. We would not need 20 decimal places on the end. It'd be way too long. So if we start with this first question, it says round to 3 decimal places. So each decimal place is to the right of the decimal place. That sounds confusing and weird, but I'll show you now. So if we find a decimal place and we go to the right, that first number there is the first, that's the second, that's the third, that's the fourth, that's the fifth, and so on. But the method is, if it says round to 3 decimal places, everything after the third number disappears, but there is a slight rule to that. You usually draw a line, and you check the number after, which is this fourth one. And if it's above or equal to 5, you round the third decimal place up, or if it's below 5, you round the third decimal place down. So in our case, 8 is above 5, so we'd get 2.317. We'd round the 6 up to a 7. Significant figures are essentially exactly the same, but you need to remember this one rule. So the first significant figure is the first number that isn't a 0. So if we round this to 3 significant figures, this time not decimal places, this is a 0, that's a 0, that's a 0, that's a 2. So that's the first number that isn't a 0. So we call that the first significant figure, then the second, and then the third. So exactly the same as rounding. After the number that you want, you draw a line, follow the same rules. That 8 is above a 5, so you round up the third significant figure, and you get 0.00255. Moving on to estimating, I like to think of it as just it's near enough. You use them rounding skills from before. So if I give you this here, 61.4 times by 4.13, and I said, in your head right now, work out this number. I don't know about you, but I cannot physically and mentally do that number in my head. It's crazy. So just to make it easier, especially on a non-calculator paper, as an example, you can round both these numbers down. So if we do, for example, 60 times by 4, you'll get 240. But now the real answer is 253.6. So there is like a good 13 difference there. So what this means is here, for your information, more you round, the more it's different. So if we go back and we use 61 instead of 60, or we use 4.1 instead of 4, it would actually be closer to the real answer. So the more you round, the more different it is. Putting this into a real example, because I don't think they'd ever give you a question like that before. Use rounding and estimating to work out the area. So if you just directly put pi into where it says pi and the radius into where it says radius, you would get this insanely long number. You would need a calculator to do that. Or if you could do it on paper, it would take you way longer than the test would take. It's basically just way too hard. So again, you just use rounding. You can round pi to 3, and you can round the radius to 2. And if you simply just put them in, 3 times by 2 squared, it gives you 12. And as you can see, that's way easier to do even in your head than the number above. And it's only 0.2 off, so it's nothing crazy. Estimating square roots, it's quite similar. You have to find the nearest square and then narrow it down. So for example, if I say estimate the square root of 50, I like to write out a few square roots on the right. Just kind of gives you an idea of where to place it in between. So 1, 4, 9, 12, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81. As you can see, square root of 50, it's between 7 squared and 8 squared. See 49 and 64. So it's closer to 7 squared. You can already tell. So if we write that out, 7 squared is 49, which is lower than 50. And then 8 squared is 64, which is higher than 50. If you write that on a number line, and you put 7 squared and 8 squared with 49 and 64 above, you can see it is closer to the 7 squared just by eye. You just type it, like put it in. And I'm going to have a guess that that's 10% of the way along that line. So we'll call it 7.1 squared. Now, the real answer is 7.071 squared. So we went that far off. But if you're wondering how do you actually find this real answer, if it says like find a specific or the real answer, you have to use interpolation, which there'll be a future video on that. Now finishing off to bounds. What is a bound? It's the biggest or smallest number that could be after it's rounded. Now to make that make sense, let's put it in a question. So if my car costs £1,000 and I want the upper and lower bound to the nearest 100, if we use these steps here, half the rounding number, subtract it and add it. There is a little watch out for the add it, and I'll show you that now. So it started off as 1,000. If we now half the rounding number, it will give you 50. And then what to the next step say subtract it. So if we subtract it, we'll get 950. And then if we add it, we will get 1050. But if we go back to the rounding bit, if I said round 1050, because it's a 5, you'd round it up. So that's not right. So you would take away 1. And you would get 1049, which is correct as you'd round down. That's literally everything with rounding, estimating and bounds. As you can see here, quick recap. You can, if it's 5 or above, you round up. If it's below 5, you round down. Same goes for significant figures. The first significant figure is the first number that isn't 0. And then estimating is basically near enough. And boundary is the maximum and lower. Thank you for watching. I hope this helped. If you want more questions, check out the Q&A videos. It might give you more of a worked example of different type of style real questions that might come up. So thank you for watching.